where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Hello there. It is Sunday, October 30th. I want to welcome you to ABC-7 Extra. I'm Stephanie Guadian. UTEP's homecoming game was held last night. While there was plenty of action out on the field, a group of protesters in the stands also caught the attention of football fans. A Facebook group put out an open call for people to take a knee during the playing of the Star-Spangled Banner. Students and community members sat down throughout the song holding a banner that read, "Black Lives Matter." The group following the lead of NFL football player Colin Kaepernick and his nonviolent protest. Tonight, my guests include a member of the UTEP protesters, a borderland expert in political sociology, and a veteran who takes issue with the movement. We want to hear from you tonight. Remember, you can always call in 915-496-1771. Leave a comment or a question for one of the guests tonight. You can email us at ABC7Extra@KVIA.com. You can also tweet Guadian ABC7. Just make sure to use the hashtag ABC7 Extra so I can find you. Well, the controversial peaceful protests are being spotted at sporting events all across the nation. We talked to protesters and those opposed to the movement at last night's UTEP game.
Fans took to the Sun Bowl Saturday to catch some football, but before the big game started, as with any game, the national anthem filled the stadium. Most of the people stood, but far off in the stands, some chose to sit. Holding a Black Lives Matter banner, some of them raised their fists during the Star-Spangled Banner.
This was just, from my point of view, one moment in time where we could get a lot of attention.
Pamela Angelis is a UTEP student who chose to sit down. She feels the protest is a reminder of ongoing violence across the country.
Just remind people that everything isn't as it should be. We're in a very volatile time now, especially with the election going on. It's brought a lot out in the open, and really we just want peace.
While the protests for the most part remained peaceful, some racial slurs were blurted out at protesters, and most of the protesters didn't want to speak on camera. But other UTEP fans like Temi Okwaneri, who's British, did sound off.
It's more about the cases of police brutality that are ongoing in America. It's more, and stepping away from that, is more about the cases of inequality that are ongoing in America. And it's more to bring an attention to that, to raise a conversation about that, to make people think and to have to start to talking about what's going on.
Of course, there was opposition.
We just came out here to support, the military families in El Paso.
Albert Solis tells me he was unaware of the protests, but said he disagreed.
El Paso has a big population of military, and for them to be doing that is kind of a sign of disrespect, not only for our soldiers here in El Paso, but for the school itself.
Others echoed Solis' sentiments.
We support law enforcement. I wish that they wouldn't do it, but again, I'm not going to impede upon their right, on their First Amendment right, so long as they don't impede on mine.
The protest only lasted a few minutes, long enough to get their message across.
It's not about the military or those that have lost their lives for America. Me being British as well, I understand that.
It is what it is. It gets attention. We were peaceful. We were respectful.
And joining us now, my guests tonight are UTEP student protester Sarah Glenn. I also have with me veteran Ray Rivera and New Mexico State University professor Dr. David Ortiz. You're an expert in social movement and civic engagement. I want to thank you all for being with us here tonight. This is certainly a topic that people have a lot of strong emotions about. We've had quite a few people call into the show already. We'll be getting to those calls in just a moment. Before we get our conversation going, though, I want to just take a moment, just in case some people aren't aware of what San Francisco quarterback Colin Kaepernick has said about why he takes the knee during the playing of the national anthem. He says, "I'm not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder." Certainly some very strong words. I want to start with you. Why did you guys decide to do it at the UTEP game, the homecoming game?
Well, specifically because this form of protest was a peaceful one and is a very well known already. We decided to do it at the UTEP homecoming game because, for the most part, we knew that that would be the highest following game. Also, with American football being such a already inherently patriotic and supported sport, we thought that that would be a very important role and aspect to use in this protest.
Okay. Right off the bat, I want to ask you, as a veteran, you were there at the game last night. You saw this protest.
Yes.
What were you feeling? What were you thinking at that point?
Well, first of all, I didn't know it was coming. But when I did see it, I felt very offended for two reasons. One from the patriotic side, but also the way I look at it, there's a time and place for everything. This was a game. We paid to see the game, not to hear someone else's opinion. So I just felt that's very inappropriate, you know. And I strongly believe in the First Amendment, but like I said, there's a time and place for everything. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't stand in the middle of a church service to protest a religious belief. Yeah, you might go outside on the sidewalk, but you wouldn't interrupt the service. So I feel that there's a time and place for everything, and the game was not it.
Okay, David, I want to ask you, because there is actually precedent, though, of events or something like this happening at sporting events dating back to when?
Oh, this is very common, dating back to, I guess, the most common and known one, the Olympics in Mexico in 1968, with Tommy Smith and John Carlos raising their fist in protest for what was then, of course, African American rights, same as today, and people of color's rights, right? But this has been happening now all over the country. By my count, I think it's 48 NFL players have done this in about 13 different teams. Megan Rapinoe of the U.S. soccer team has done it too. About, I think, 13 WNBA players have done it too. And more towards what we've been seeing right now, I think this has happened actually. There have been about 52 protests in high schools around the country that are taking the knee or sitting down or raising their fist. And I think about 36 colleges with this one now in about 35 states across the nation. Okay,
so clear to see that gaming steam, but can it make a difference, this type of peaceful protest?
It can. It's all about raising awareness, right? And making sure that the issue is known by the public. And this is why, although it's a peaceful protest, you want it to be done at a time or at a moment where you get the most attention by the media, by others, etc., right? So it seems, and for that to happen, you want it to be perhaps not very disruptive, but at least a little bit disruptive, right? And meaningful. And that is why they do these types of events, for example, in the presence of the national anthem, saying, well, you know, I am a patriot, but to me this country represents something different, and we need to start making moves towards the country that we really want, right? And of course the media does pay attention since you are here with us.
Did you take that all into consideration when you thought about the type of protest that you wanted to do?
Absolutely. I feel like one aspect, there are many aspects to why people take the knee, but a particular aspect for me, myself, and I know many other students who were involved in community members, was that when choosing a type or style of protest, obviously the first one that came to mind was taking a knee. And like I said, with the national anthem being such a, for the most part, non-disrupted, non-attacked, kind of symbolic thing in the football game, at the beginning of the football game, before any sporting event, and we all know sports is held so closely to Americans' hearts, that it's really important that it is a peaceful protest, but that it does kind of stir up a sense of awareness. It does get people talking. It inherently starts a conversation, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. And that's why there are colleges and high schools and people using the platform that they have to raise awareness, because it's about progressing as a country, and unless we admit that something's not going right, we can't identify the problem and progress.
Okay. Lots of spectators at the game last night. We talked to a few of them about what they saw at the game and what they felt about it. Let's go ahead and listen to some folks from the crowd.
I brought 3 flags today, and the reason for that is that I want to show my support for law enforcement and our troops all across this country. And all this protest is going on, and kneeling and so forth. I heard that they were going to kneel and they were going to protest. I just wanted to show my support for law enforcement and our troops across the country.
It's a free country, it's a democracy. Our soldiers fight for these freedoms, and if that's what they want to do personally, I don't agree with it. But because it is a free country,
we hope you enjoy clips from your favorite pastime arcade game.
I understand why some people are upset, but if they obviously feel strong enough to make a stand, maybe people should listen to what they're thinking.
They don't appreciate what the flag really means, and the sacrifice that so many people have done, ever since the United States was founded.
And we're back. We do have a lot of people who've already called into the show. We want to get to their calls. Let's go ahead and listen to our first one.
They're not saying Black Lives Matter more than anyone else. They're just saying Black Lives need to matter as well. And the bigger thing of the whole situation of kneeling down, I really think it's atrocious that people are trying to take away people's rights to protest when really the people that are fighting for us and overseas are protecting our rights, and try to take away our rights or try to take somebody else's right by protest is actually letting those people fighting overseas die in vain for protecting us.
Ray, you're not trying to take away the right to protest, right?
No, not at all. I believe everybody has the right to an opinion. I just think you have to choose your time and place, and a sports activity is certainly not it. The place to protest should be at the ballot box. That's where it should be, not at a game. Say you wouldn't want to see a boxer in the middle of the ring all of a sudden hold his fist up. You're paying to see him fight, to do his best. It's the same thing with the game. Now, a lot of people look at the flag as different symbols and everything else, but just like people get excited, say, about a UTEP flag, well, the veterans get very excited about seeing the U.S. flag because it has many meanings going all the way back to Iwo Jima. I remember being overseas. I was served 21 years in the service. I was Southeast Asia, Europe, Central America. My father was in Korea. My son was in Iraq. And, of course, I spent time in Southeast Asia. And even my dog was a military service member. And I'll tell you, one of the things you feel when you see the U.S. flag, you see it in the distance flying, it gives you a sense of home, security, warmth, pride. And that's what it's all about. As far as being oppressed, I grew up in the 50s. I grew up in the 60s. I went overseas for the people who didn't like the American soldiers. So I know what it's about being oppressed. It's not really, I think for the message gets lost when they say Black Lives Matter. I don't think they really mean that just black people matter. I think it means they just had enough. But then what I say to this, we have all been in a barrel. At one time, years ago, they used to have signs that said, no Irishmen or dogs allowed. And then it went on to Mexicans. And so every ethnic group goes to their changes.
Has seen their struggle, certainly.
Yes.
David, can I ask you, is this the first time that we've seen the Star-Spangled Banner, though, sort of come under fire or being used?
No, not at all. Actually, it's a common thing. Again, in '68, it was during the anthem, right? And I think interesting that Ray brings patriotism, because the Kaepernick protests have brought a lot of discussion about patriotism. And the interesting thing is that I am sure both of these parties, people that protest and people that are against the protest, think of themselves as patriots. They're doing the right thing for the country that they want. And the interesting thing here is just the meaning for them of how to achieve and what the country that they want is different. Doing something like this during the Star-Spangled Banner, or in front of a flag or something, it just means for the protesters, I want this country to be equal for everyone. I want us to overcome some of the problems, right? And then for people that are not protesting or anti-protesters, it means, well, perhaps you should not be doing it in front of the flag that I respect so much, etc. It's a very common thing that happens. Of course, everyone. It's not like these two groups of people see America completely different, or the meaning of the flag completely different. It's just that the rituals that they associate with this flag give them pause for different reasons, and give them types of expectations when they see this, and behavior that they should conduct in different ways.
Okay. We have a lot more to talk about. Well, we got to take a real quick break. You're watching ABC-7 Extra. When we come back, we're going to share more of your comments. Remember, you can call us 915-496-1771 and share your thoughts. You can also tweet me as Guadian ABC7. You're watching ABC-7 Extra, where news comes first. And welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. My guests tonight are UTEP student protester Sarah Glenn, veteran Ray Rivera, and also New Mexico State University professor Dr. David Ortiz. He's an expert in social movement and civic engagement. Again, I want to thank you all for being with us tonight. We're going to get to some Facebook comments because we did have a lot of people go to our Facebook page and also express their opinion. The first one is coming from Juan Saenz, and he says, "For the ones kneeling, they seem young enough to enlist into the military. Maybe then that will give them a completely different perspective on what our anthem stands for." Your reaction to that? You just mentioned to us during the break that you come from a military family.
I do. My grandfathers both were in the military. I have cousins now that are in the Marines as well as the Navy. I have lots of friends that are also enlisted in the Army. And I think there should be noted that there is quite the following of veterans that also stand with this form of protest. To that comment in particular, yes, I guess you could say I'm young enough to enlist, obviously, but the idea behind the movement isn't we're wanting to frustrate or bring shame or be unpatriotic. It's about the message. And I feel like oftentimes people do get a tad bit emotional and they're not hearing the message. But I'm also not going to sit here and say that people aren't using it as an excuse to not listen to what's being said by the protesters. At the end of the day, there's a reason why we're doing it during the national anthem, and there's a reason why we're trying to be that fine line between disruptive but also peaceful. And it's because a lot of people will say, well, there might be a better time to do this, and there might be a better time to do that, but there are people getting killed, and they don't have that time. You know, a good friend of mine who is also a protester who did an interview for ABC7 made the comment that what if there is a African or American man or a person of color who gets stopped by the police? Say he's going to reach out for the fact that, oh, let me show you my military ID, I'm on my way to the base, and there you go, he gets shot in cold blood because maybe that officer felt like his life was in danger. He didn't know what he was reaching for, or at least that's what he's going to quote. It's not just about affecting people of military, it's about people in general. People who don't get that option to go back to the police station and take it up with their supervisor. Why? Because they're dead. Police brutality is a huge issue that needs to be talked about, and that's the #1 reason why this protest is happening. Black Lives Matter is a huge issue that needs to be talked about because African American males are targeted at a higher rate than any other ethnic group in the country. And that is a statistic that is backed up by many, many, many different institutions.
You're shaking your head in agreement.
Yeah, that is correct. I actually, most sociological research and most all criminological research shows that actually minorities are targeted at a much higher rate for lots of different crimes than whites in all across the nation. Just to give you one example, Stephanie, whites are more likely to use and sell drugs, but African Americans and Latinos are much more likely across the nation to be incarcerated and tried for the use and the sale of drugs. But it's not only police. The research also shows that the actually criminal justice system treats African Americans and Latinos differently. There is a much higher chance if you're an African American or a Latino to actually end up with a much harsher sentence than if you're white.
Okay, we want to get, I'm going to get back to you in just a second. We want to get a couple more Facebook comments in and also take another call. We have a Facebook comment from Melinda Bianca Menchaca. She says, "This is an embarrassment in my opinion, total lack of respect for the colors of this country. People have died fighting for that flag. If you want to make a statement for BLM, use your education to come up with a solution for all lives matter." And that is something we hear a lot when sort of in response to Black Lives Matter. Well, all lives matter. We're going to get back to you in just a sec, but let's hear another caller.
My name is Willie Jackson, and I believe in freedom of expression. So what they did is okay with me, and whatever they feel, that's their right. It's a free country.
All right. Well, thank you very much for calling. You were go ahead. You were shaking your head when these two were talking. You don't agree?
No, I don't, because let's face it. When you do research, first of all, you don't know the people that you're talking to are really telling you what they're thinking, or are they telling you what you want to hear? The other thing is there's actual studies out there that shows there's more Caucasians being shot by police officers than they are of other races. So it all depends on what study that you review. So you can't just say, oh, it's all blacks or it's all Hispanics. The number of police officers being shot has doubled since 2015. Now, when I'm talking about the white studies, the Washington Post in 2015 did a survey, and they said there were 735 Caucasians that had been shot by the police, and it was only like, I think, 325 people of color. So that's why I say you got to be careful with studies.
Well, I think we can all agree. Let's say that there is certainly too much violence out there. Let me take a quick break, and we're going to come right back. We're going to take a lot more of your calls. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We're running out of time, but I want to make sure that all three of my guests get a chance to give final thoughts. We'll start with you.
I guess just after the protests and everything, I just asked that El Paso and the United States community in general, we stop accepting the status quo and keep pushing for more progress as a whole.
Are you planning more protests?
Absolutely.
Okay. And are you ready for that? More protests?
Well, sure. You know, like I said, I have nothing against the First Amendment. I just think there's a time and place they should choose. And like I said earlier, the place to protest is at the voting booth, and except for presidential elections, you don't see very many people vote one way or the other. And that's a big issue. Let's start talking with each other, not at each other. Let's not be divisive. Let's come together and tackle these issues.
You make a good point. People need to get out and vote. Election day right around the corner. And David?
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. When sociologists and criminologists use data, they actually use police precinct data. So it's data that comes right out of the police precincts. And that we use rates to compare to the national population. What I would say to these two is that they're both exercising their right to free speech, which is what we should all do in this country. We wanted to make it better, and of course, hopefully, in that exercising of our free speech rights, we can also kind of reach across the aisle and try to get some sort of understanding of why each one has such a position, and then maybe get into some middle ground and try to resolve some of the issues that affect us.
Find some common ground. Certainly an issue not going to go away anytime soon. Thank you all very much for sharing your opinions with us tonight, and thank you for watching ABC-7 Extra. I'm Stephanie Guadian. Have a great week ahead. Good night.